Look, I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin. Look, it is. We're creating now a market that has more liquidity, more transparency.
비트코인의 장기적인 가능성을 매우 낙관적으로 보고 있으며 앞으로 더 많은 유동성과 투명성을 갖춘 시장이 만들어질 것이라고 주장하고 있는 인물은 전 세계 최대의 자본 세력이자 세계 1위 자산운용사 블랙록의 CEO 레리 핑크입니다. 블랙록은 비트코인 현물 ETF를 정식 출시하면서 비트코인을 역사상 가장 인기 있는 ETF로 만들었으며 현재 크립토 시장에서 가장 중요한 기관 플레이어 역할을 하고 있습니다. 그런 블랙록의 CEO 레리 핑크가 생각하는 향후 전반적인 경제 흐름에 대한 전망과 크립토 시장에 대한 디테일한 인사이트에 대해서 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
Look who's here, BlackRock's Larry Fink, live in studio. We're talking market bubbles. Where does he see them? How he's guiding his team to invest around them. We will talk infrastructure investing in the wake of that Baltimore Bridge disaster and tragedy. And probably one of the most important and urgent issues for our audience, smarter ways to save for retirement, but how to start right now. All right, first, let's get to the markets really quickly. We do have green on the screen here for all four majors. We've got the Dow point gain looking pretty healthy, 295 points to the upside. So the Russell is the biggest percentage gainer. It's up about 1.5%. NASDAQ, it's wiggling a bit. It's up 7 points. The recent rock star, NVIDIA, though, maybe that's the problem. It's all the way at the bottom of the NASDAQ 100. S&P, as you see right there, up about 18 points. Speaking of which, we are coming up on the end of the month and the end of yet another winning quarter. The broader index is on pace for its fifth winning month. And flip it over quarter to date, the S&P has put in an absolutely gorgeous gain of 9.5%. Now, if you stretch that out over the past year, the 31% run-up either looks fabulous or worrisome. What does the world's largest asset manager think right now? With $10 trillion in assets under management, BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink is here, and we're also joined by Charlie Gasparino. Charlie.
All right. Now, before we get into sort of macro stuff and that amazing letter that you put out, which I really enjoyed, and infrastructure actually plays in that letter, so we should talk about that a little bit. I noticed that Donald Trump once said, my money manager, Larry Fink, made me a lot of money.
Yes.
Did very good. You were in the White House with him. He had a lot of good things to say about you because he had his money with BlackRock. If you were his real money manager now, he's sitting on paper worth $5 billion. You know he's cash poor. What would you tell him to do? This is DJT, the new stock, as you know. Everybody's talking about it.
The stock has had an amazing run. And I think in a SPAC, the Trump organization needs to hold their shares for either 1 or 2 years.
No, the board can tell him to sell now. They can give, and by the way, the board is not exactly the BlackRock board. It's his son and his buddies,
But I believe there's some covenants when they go public. I don't know it, but most SPACs have covenants.
Well, if there wasn't a covenant, would you tell him to sell right now?
I don't know enough about the company, so I'm not going to. I would recommend him not asking me that question.
Larry,
so you would give him no advice?
I look at it. Looks high to me on every metrics. It looks like it's a very high stock price. But look at it. There's a lot of momentum going on there. Time will tell. But by every metrics, it's very. It doesn't make any money. By every metrics, it's a very expensive stock.
You don't expect a call from him, right?
I would take his call, and I would give him advice if he asked. But that advice would be private, Charlie.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, forget about some of the IPOs lately, DJT and Reddit, and how they've spiked. The S&P, we just showed it. To some, it looks very much like a bubble, and it has the characteristics of a bubble. Not just the S&P, but this entire market. It's getting frothy. It's got what many would say is a compelling story. That would be AI. What kind of meetings are you having at BlackRock about how to invest around what could be a bubble bursting?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a bubble. I think we're seeing more validation with stock prices. We're seeing earnings momentum in a lot of companies. Even today, you cited the Russell. So the Russell 5000 is when that goes up at more, that's starting to tell you there's more breadth in the marketplace. Historically, we looked at so much of the gains in 7 stocks, but actually the breadth of the market is expanding. To me, that gives me a good sign. When I talk to CEOs and businesses, probably 80% of the companies that I'm talking to are seeing upward momentum.
In earnings and stuff like that.
earnings, revenue growth, margins, productivity is up. Let's be clear, productivity fell during COVID when people were working from home. People are back in the office, productivity is increasing. Productivity is a good sign for expanding margins. And so, look, we read the newspapers, we listen to television, it's full of negativity.
Right.
And at the same time, we're having record stock.
Listen,
Sorry?
what assets in the last, let's say, 6 months and their moves have surprised you? I mean, an obvious one might be the AI-related stocks, big tech, but what else?
Actually, in some of those AI stocks, their earnings are actually validating, like NVIDIA's earnings are validating some of its stock price. Now it's trading at a 30 PE, but and arguably was growing faster than that. So let's see how that continues on. Look, I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up. I mean, look, it is. We're creating now a market that has more liquidity, more transparency, and I'm pleasantly surprised, and I would never have predicted it before we filed it, that we were going to see this type of retail demand.
So you thought you'd do good, but not this good.
I thought, yes.
Well, IBIT is your ETF over at iShares.
Yes.
It's about to overtake Grayscale, which was in the business certainly a lot longer. You look at the gains since January 11th when it first came about.
Yes.
Have you ever seen this much inflow this quickly into
IBIT is the fastest growing ETF in the history of ETFs. Nothing has gained assets as fast as IBIT in the history of ETFs.
So Ether is next with an ETF?
We'll see. That's under registration.
Okay, so let's just not talk about your product.
Right.
Talk about Ether. The SEC, there's lots of noise about them declaring Ether a security, which would take it out of the Bitcoin category as a commodity. How does that translate into an ETF?
I don't think that, look, and I really can't talk about it, but I don't think that designation is going to be that deleterious to.
Oh, really? So even if it's a security, you can start an ETF, an ETH ETF?
I think so, yeah.
Well, that's wild.
So we got a financial locomotive heading toward a cliff, and that is retirement. So you're going to talk more about that in just a minute. As Larry said, he's not on Ozempic, but many Americans are, and that is already proving to extend their lives.
Yes.
But are retirement funds keeping up with longer lifespans? Larry Fink says not even close. He is sounding the loudest alarms to date, but he's pairing the urgency with a fix for Americans, from boomers to millennials, Gen X, Y, and Zers. Larry's retirement solutions right after the break.